Alright, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to Writers Live presents Jason Rekulak. My name is Christina Warnich. I'm the Assistant Mod Adult Activities Coordinator for Palm Beach County Library System. Thank you all for being here today. Before I get into my spiel, I'm going to ask that you take a moment to silence your cell phones. Thank you. As I mentioned, this is part of our Writers Live series, which is now in our 17th year, connecting readers and authors. I would like to recognize the Friends of the Palm Beach County Library. This event would not be possible without their support. Thank you to those that are currently members of the Friends. If you are interested in joining or even donating, we do have some brochures over here on this table. You're welcome to grab one. I'd also like to thank our friends at Murder on the Beach, our local bookseller for today. Also, huge supporters of our libraries and library events. Sales directly benefit local bookshops as well as Friends of the Library, and copies of Jason's latest novel, Last One at the Wedding, as well as some copies of Hidden Pictures are available for purchase after the author talk for a book signing. And a little bit about our special guests. Jason is the author of the instant New York Times best-selling book, The Last One at the Wedding. His other novels are Hidden Pictures, which was winner of a Goodreads Choice Award, and The Impossible Fortress, which was an Edgar Award finalist. His work has been translated to 25 languages. Before writing full-time, he worked for many years in book publishing, and he currently lives in Philadelphia with his family. Oline Cogdill, who is our moderator today, she reviews mystery fiction for the Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale, and Tribune Publishing Wire, Publishers Weekly, and Shelf Awareness. She has been honored with the Raven Award from the Mystery Writers of America, and she is in her 8th year as a judge for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in the Mystery Thriller category. Oline has an essay on reviewing in the Anthony, Agatha, and Barry Award-winning book, How to Write a Mystery, co-edited by Lee Child and Laurie Barking. And without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Jason Rekulak and Oline Cogdill.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, I am delighted to be moderating this event. I love this event. I love the fact that the library brings authors to readers. And I want to thank each of you for being here, for being readers, for supporting libraries, for supporting authors, and if you can, for buying books from our wonderful bookseller over here. I will be doing a couple more of these events, and I'm just delighted. Jason, we've never met before, which is unusual because most of the authors I do know. Now, as Chris said, you started out in publishing, and you started out working for St. Martin's Press, and then you became a publisher at Court Publishing for 17 years or 18 years?
Yeah, about that.
How did working in publishing affect your writing, and why did it make you become a writer, or did it?
Before I answer the question, let me reiterate what you just said. Thank you for coming. Thanks for being here. It's so hard to get people just to read a book, you know? And it's even harder to get to read my books, and then it's even harder to get them to show up for events on a beautiful, beautiful Saturday afternoon. So I really appreciate everybody coming out for this, and the library for having me. It's super, super cool opportunity. This is the nicest place I've ever had in a day. I've been to Cleveland. I went to Connecticut, up some pretty cold cities. Anyway, to answer your question, I always, I was just one of these kids who, when I was a kid, I was always writing, drawing comic strips and things like that. I always wanted to write. How do you do it? What am I going to do with myself? How am I going to make money? So the only thought I had was, well, maybe I could be around the people who do this job, And I was fortunate in that I was born in New Jersey. I had family there, so it's actually kind of easy for me to go into Manhattan and get a job in New York as an editorial assistant. The downside of that, the West End, actually, I'll tell you why it was so easy. I was like, boy, this seemed really easy to get this job. But the boss that I was hired to assist, he just churned through assistants he was a raging alcoholic. He was like a nightmare boss. Horrible. And after about a year and a half, he said, "You have no future in this business. What you really should do is get a job on a cruise ship as an entertainer." I never forgot this. Wait a minute, I still hold the grudge because I tell this story all the time. I said, "No, I can't sing. I can't just. I'm actually terrible. I've never been on a cruise ship." But that was the occupation that he chose for me. So in despair, I was, while he had a substance problem, he was very successful at his job. And so I just figured, well, this guy's like the expert, and I'm 23 years old. And if he says I have the future, I guess I don't. And so I moved to Philadelphia because I was dating somebody there. And I kind of wanted to see how that was going to work out. And just through luck, I met a guy who wanted to start his own publishing company. And he didn't really know what he was doing, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But we were friendly, and we liked each other, and we were like, all right, let's try to do this. And that publishing company went on to become this, it was like a little indie press called Workbooks, it still exists. And I did it like 18, 19 years. And we basically kind of taught ourselves how to publish books. And I learned so much from doing that. I learned so much. Nobody sent us anything, right? Like agents never sent us anything because number one, we had no money. So we couldn't pay big advances. And then number two, if you have a really great manuscript, why would you trust it to these five knuckleheads in Philadelphia who don't know what they're doing, So what I had to do was you just do a lot of like outreach and find talented writers and try to work with them to figure out like ideal vehicles for their talent. A lot of people are like good at something, but they just don't know how to like make money off of it. They don't know what they should be doing with their talent. And so I realized that's what my job was, is like steer people toward projects that I would know how to sell. And in the process of doing that, I spent a lot of time thinking about stories at a high level. How does a story begin? How does a story end? Endings are so important. So many books have good beginnings, right? And so many books fall apart at the end. And it made me realize, like, if you can nail the ending, if your book has a great ending, people are going to love it, And it's I just learned so much about storytelling by like helping other people. But all the while, I always wanted to write. All the while, I was always actually going home and working on my own things at night. Wrote a lot of books that I just, either abandoned or just shoved under my bed. I probably wrote for 20 years without selling anything, But as like the publishing house was like ramping up, I felt like, sorry, I feel like I'm getting that in this. I just felt like I was like, I think I'm like figuring out slowly how to do this. And then at some point, I guess 6 years ago, I finally had like enough momentum and I figured out enough about writing that I could like, go off and write full time, which is what I do now. Sorry. Howard, here's a good question.
This is your interview. You talk. You've had 3 well-received novels, and the latest one is The Last One at the Wedding. So let's start with that. I think the theme of this novel, ongoing theme, is betrayal and misconception. It revolves around Frank Zapowski. He's overjoyed. His only daughter, Maggie, calls him, invites him to her wedding. Now, they have been estranged for about 3 years. Her mother, his wife, died when she was young, and he raised her by himself. But they had a break for the past 3 years, and they really haven't talked. So he's just really happy to go there. It should be a moment of joy for him. But he has so many misconceptions. Maggie is a successful businesswoman, but she's marrying an artist. So he assumes they're very struggling. What he doesn't realize is she's really marrying into a billionaire family, and which lets the husband-to-be be an artist. 2 things immediately struck me about your novel, and those are the choices that you made in setting and character, which are very unusual. I'd like to talk about those 2. Let's start with the setting. That's that of a wedding. Now, there are several mysteries that revolve around weddings. Usually, they're light cozies. I know because I actually wrote one. But yours is not a cozy. Yours is not a light mystery. It's very much of a hard-boiled, not really hard-boiled, but it's very solid. And you use, I think, the structure of a wedding to kind of mimic the structure of a mystery. Can we talk about why the wedding?
Yeah, that was the inspiration for the whole book. I come from a really small family. If you Google my last name, which is pronounced Rekulak, you'll just get me. There's like 7 of us, you know. It's Ukrainian. And so I never went to a lot of weddings when I was a kid. I don't think I went to a wedding until I was 22. And the first time I went to a wedding, it was a coworker's wedding. We drove, it was in New England. It was actually in New Hampshire, coincidentally. And it was so exciting to me. I was like, wow, this is so much fun. We're going on an adventure, you know. We're going to go. The food is going to be incredible. We're staying in this exciting place. And I loved everything about it. And I always thought it'd be fun to use the structure of like a sort of traditional 3-day like wedding weekend as the structure for a mystery or a thriller. I wanted to do it for 20 years, but I could never figure out what the story was. I just had the idea of the structure. I like books that have a structure. I love books that have a form. My biggest pet peeve with thrillers, I hate thrillers where there's like 10 timelines and 10 points of view. The chapters are like Tommy, today. Yeah. The next chapter is Betty, 3 days ago. You know, the next chapter is like Tanya, a week before. Right? I don't. You can't think of a slide rule and like track who's who, when is this happening, and moreover, I just find that all those shifts just take me out of the story. And what I wanted to do was write a book where I wanted you to feel like you're going to this wedding. You know, I wanted to happen like in real time, no jumping around. And so, you know, it start with an invitation and end with not exactly and people take a sort of coda after the weddings, after everything's over and hit all those.
And so you have that suspense already built in. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's exactly why weddings are so great for writers, because you're seeing people, for a lot of these people, it's like one of the biggest days of their lives, right? So if the emotions are heightened. And there's a whole network of relationships, which that's why I love going to them, because like, you know, as a third party, I'm trying to map the characters. You know, it's just like when you read a book, really, you're trying to figure out what people's stories are, you know. And I guess there's a big element of that in this book, because you, the reader, don't know who any of these people are. Frank, the UPS driver who's going, he doesn't know who any of these people are. And so I think it kind of helps like put the reader like on his side. We're all trying to figure this out together.
Yeah, we could. At our wedding, we had one drunk, and she sat on my husband's lap, and we had like 25, 30 pictures of that. Thank you very much. But let's talk about the unusual character. Frank, he's 53, he's a UPS driver. That's been his career all the time. And he's just kind of an ordinary guy. How did you come up with his character? And also, what kind of research did you do to make him so authentic?
Yeah, that's my second pet peeve with thrillers, is that sometimes I think the voice of these books tend to sound very similar and like very familiar. And so for this book, I wanted it to be narrated by like a really specific person, like with a specific way of talking that wasn't just like a generic thriller voice. And so, and in my previous book was narrated by a 21-year-old babysitter, a woman. So I wanted to do something entirely different. I didn't want to do the same book over and over. So I figured, well, what could be more different than this 21-year-old babysitter than this 53-year-old, you know, dad from Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, who drives a UPS truck. He's an Army veteran. And my hope was that, you know, you read a lot of these thrillers, and sometimes the same tropes come up over and over, but by seeing all these things through his eyes, through his perspective, it would make everything feel fresh, make everything feel a little different. It's like, this is a story I haven't heard before, because I've not heard this particular kind of guy telling this kind of story. So, yeah, and I can say one thing other. I don't want to spoil things for people who read the book.
We all have read and love books with private detectives, cops, lawyers, but I think it's also refreshing when you read a story about an ordinary guy. And you make Frank, no spoilers, I promise, very relatable. He's you give him many layers, which means he's not always sympathetic. And he can be a little bit judgmental. And you kind of understand why he had this estrangement with his daughter. And he feels himself totally out of bounds at this wedding he's going to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I also realized I forgot to answer your previous question about research and how I research Frank. And I'll just answer that because it's kind of a funny story. I was thinking, how am I going to research a UPS driver? And there's literally a knock on my door, right? And I go downstairs, it's my UPS driver. There's this guy named Ian, and he's on my doorstep with a box. And so, he gets me the box, and I'm like, Ian, wait, stop, hold on. I got to ask you a couple of questions. And he was fantastic. As soon as I started asking, this is true. If anybody here is a writer or a reporter, you know this. As soon as you start asking people about their jobs, they love to talk about their jobs. People will talk all day about what they do, and they'll tell you everything. And so Ian and I actually got to be pretty good friends. And he gave me all kinds of great insight into what it's like being a UPS driver. He volunteered details I would never think of on my own. Like, what is your least favorite thing to deliver if you're a UPS driver? Right? You might guess kitty litter, maybe. That sucks. Printer paper. His least favorite thing is car tires, right? I didn't know you could buy car tires online, but you can. And they strap them in cardboard so he can't even roll them. He has to drag them, They strap them like packs of two. So anyway, that's what you get when you actually talk to someone who does the job instead of trying to make it up in your head. You get these great kinds of details. And now that I answered that research question, I forgot my question.
About the research and stuff like that. Were there any other stories he had?
Oh, yeah, he had a bunch. I mean, one really good insights into the job, and I'm kind of blanking on other things without. I had to ask him about certain things that happened near the end of the book because once they get back from the wedding, there's this one particular incident that I was like, well, what would really happen if you? Yeah, it was. But anyway, it's given me a whole new appreciation for UPS, FedEx, all those guys. I do think twice before I order things like car tires, something like that. You know what I mean? I just go get my pet food at the store now. I don't know.
Well, I like that also. You're very sympathetic to Frank, but he's not always likable, nor is Maggie. And I think that shows a richness of character. So very much so. My favorite character in the book, though, is Tammy, and that's Frank's sister. She's grounded, she's down to earth, and she's just happy that the family's back together. Where did this character come? What was your inspiration from her?
So I figured, I was thinking about this book, and I'm like, okay, Frank's going to the wedding, who's in the car with him? And I spent a lot of time deliberating, who should be in the car with him? Should he be married? Should he not be married? Should he have a second wife? And somehow in the process, I landed on the idea of him bringing his sister, and she just has to be temperamentally different from him to be a nice foil to him. There's a lot of my mom and Tammy. Tammy says a lot of things that my mother would say. She's very vocal about her opinions. She tells it like it is,
No filter.
No filter. So yeah, she's a lot of fun to write. But I guess she's an acknowledged, like my mother, maybe one or two other people in my family.
Did your mother sew it?
Yeah.
So did she recognize herself?
No. And that is the truth. Anytime I've modeled a character after people in real life, they never see it. Never see it. There's a woman in Hidden Pictures, my previous book, named Mitzi, and she's modeled after my friend's mother. And I was worried that I was maybe copying her too much because my friend's mother is a psychic who works out of her house, like Mitzi. She cleans her down the kitchen table like Mitzi. She's very strong opinions about daylight savings time and Whole Foods prices like Mitzi. Put all that stuff verbatim in the book. And when his mother went to go read the book, she's like, oh, she's okay with all this. She's like, that Mitzi, what a nut. People never see it.
It's hysterical. She's a psychic. She cleans her gun. No clue there. I find that
Are we all?
family estrangements are very sad, I think. And, but they're also real rich fodder for a book. And it's a lot of family dynamics in this book between Frank and Maggie, between Maggie and her in-laws and her future husband's parents. Lots of going. Tell us about how family dynamics enter into your plots and why are they important?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know in the case of this book, I've never been estranged from anybody. I'm like the person in the family that everyone talks to. So, but yeah, no, right, exactly. Someone just said, I'm sorry. Christmas and Thanksgiving is always at my house, and it's always really fun. But, you know, so something I spent a lot of time thinking about, you know, why do people stop talking to each other, and how do these rifts form? How can we get past them? Can you ever get past them? Sometimes you can't. And what I found is that everybody I know has something like this in their family, but most people don't like to talk about it. You know, I don't see it in fiction very much, but it seems more common than ever now. We hear about people, it's like, I just don't talk to my parents anymore. Yeah. I'm like, what? You know? So it's something that's always been on my mind, and I don't remember how it ended up being part of this book, but it did. So, and yeah, I do spend a lot of time, especially, you know, the other weird thing about, you know, getting older is, you know, now I have kids and my kids are teenagers, and so, like, you know, I don't want to be estranged from my own kids someday, you know, so I'm like, okay, what would I have to do to, like, mess this up? There's all kinds of ways it can go wrong, and, you know, and so, I don't know if I'm kind of battling, but it's just a complicated subject. And sometimes you take these complicated subjects, and my way of like thinking about them is to write a story about them. But I don't know that I've necessarily reached a conclusion about anything. But it's just a way to like think on paper about, you know, how things can go wrong, how things can get fixed again. And
Ian Gardner, that's his name, right, Ian? Aiton, sorry. It's been a while since I read the book. He and his family aren't just rich. They are super rich. They are beyond rich. They have this wonderful compound where you could live there and never see each other. The wedding is going to be very over the top. Guests have to sign an NDA and thing. There are, the event staff is ex-military. And Frank is really out of his level here. How did you research these mega rich people? And I love also the dynamics of Frank, who's a blue collar man, and this wealthy family and how they mesh or don't mesh. So let's talk about the wealthy.
sure, I mean, you know, one of the interesting things about, I mentioned that when I was like 23, I went to go work in New York City, and my salary was $18,000 a year. And, you know, one of the neat things about publishing is that it is one of these industries where it gives you insight into people at all different points of the economic spectrum, you know. And I remember, like, this was my first time in, like, New York City, just being kind of overwhelmed by it, you know. And really, I was feeling like Frank. I was feeling way out of my element. I remember, it's ridiculous stuff. One time, I don't know if anybody still remembers who Joan Collins is. This is the 90s. Joan Collins was coming in, she had written a book. And so, you know, she comes into the office with her fur coat and like throws it on my chair. You know? And anyway, I just remember, you know, and well, you know, the other thing about that job was you had people there who had come from money. And then you had people like at all different levels, you know, and so, and I remember feeling a lot of just insecurity and anxiety, and like, you know, I could like, you know, pass as long as I really trust, okay, people didn't know where I went to school, they didn't know what my parents did. You know, my dad was a construction worker, my dad was a drywall taper, my mom didn't have a job, she was a home worker, or homemaker, you know, just raised us, and, well, she worked at Costco, actually, when I went to high school. And so insecurities Frank feels, that goes back to when I was like 21, 22, 23, like in Manhattan, just trying to like make sense of the world. Like, how does all this stuff work? And where do I fit into it? And the thing is, as I got more successful in publishing and you work with best-selling authors, some of these best-selling authors, like, they do really, really well for themselves, and they're multimillionaires themselves. But I've always felt like I've had like one foot in both worlds because, when I go home, like my parents are still, my parents, and my family's still my family. I remember being at one wedding in New England. It was really lavish, really over the top. And I remember thinking, I wonder how my parents, what they would make of this, like when we'd go to these weddings, you'd be like, what would people from like that part of my life be like in this part of my life? And those collisions are what this book is all about.
Right, absolutely. Did you do any other research about wealthy people or, over the top weddings, since the one you went to?
No, I mean, just from, not apart from like people I know. I mean, Philadelphia is another city where like you have sort of all kinds of extreme disparities of wealth. There's other people in Philly that, do really, really well for themselves, and there's a lot of poverty too. So, and you can like walk 6 blocks and like see like, the whole spectrum of different kinds of people. So.
What inspires your novels? Is there one idea that you get, or a newspaper article you've read, or just a dream?
No, I usually just start with like a premise or an idea, or a situation, and then the story tends to grow out of a situation. So, and I also do really like to do a lot of stuff with form. Like in the case of this book, the idea was to do something with the structure of a wedding. My previous book, Hidden Pictures, if anybody's knows that one, that book has an interesting origin because what had happened was I'd written a whole novel that nobody wanted. I spent 2 years writing this book and everybody turned it down. It got accepted by no one. And so I said to my agent, well, what should I do you think? Yeah, should I go work on a cruise ship? As an entertainer, and he said, no, just write another book. And I was like, oh my gosh, easy for you to say. I just sat here for 2 years writing this. And, but I had these friends who were illustrators, and I thought, the only way this is going to be tolerable, to like write a whole other book that may or may not get published again, is if I can work with these 2 other people. And so I called them up and I said, I'm thinking of writing a mystery that has clues that are illustrated. And if I do that, will you guys draw the clues? And they said, yeah, great. That sounds like a lot of fun. What is the mystery about? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know what it is. I just know that there's going to be pictures that are clues to a murder. And they said, great. Well, call us when you figure it out. And I remember thinking, okay, I knew I wanted someone in the book to be drawing the pictures. I knew I wanted them to be clues. I knew that the pictures would sort of have to change over the course of the book so that they weren't the same kind of picture over and over. There'd be some kind of visual variety. And I knew that because publishers would want to do a book in black and white, whoever was drawing probably had to be using a pencil or a pen or maybe a black crayon. So in hindsight, even though I didn't know what the story was, I actually knew a lot about what the book became. And I spent about 3 months trying to think of, different stories that could sort of fit that form, It's almost like a sonnet, like a sonnet has like very specific rules. It has to be a certain way, but it could be about anything. Like with Hidden Pictures, I had these parameters. They were going to be like these clues, but I didn't know what the story was. And then one day it just, I don't know, hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, it's going to be about a 5-year-old boy who's channeling this supernatural thing, and there's going to be a babysitter, and I don't think it hit me like a ton of bricks. I think your subconscious probably works on these things in the background while you're sleeping, and then one day it reveals it to you, and you're like, oh, right.
When you research, or do you research anything for a book, what has surprised you the most?
Research always surprises you. It's definitely, like the car tire story I told a couple minutes ago. That stuff is great. Anytime you talk to somebody, So I do research a lot, you know. I mean, if you know, I'm writing about a veterinarian, as I am right now, you know, I'm calling like everyone I know who works in like a animal shelter or a veterinarian, because they will just, you know, they'll have stories and ideas, and people do love to talk about what they do. So I'm not sure there's any one thing in particular that surprises me the most. Except like everything, it always surprises you. Like you never know what you're going to get when you ask people about this stuff.
Do current affairs ever enter into your books, or your idea of the thought?
Yeah, I think so. The question is, do current affairs ever enter the books or the plot? I think so. I mean, there's a lot of topical stuff in Last One at the Wedding. But I try to be careful about it because I don't want to, you know, it's entertainment. The number one is entertainment. You don't want to lecture people, you know? But nevertheless, some people who really don't like my books. You know, you can read my 1-star reviews on Amazon, and like they're all over the place. They're like, you know, he's a liberal snowflake, he's a transphobic bigot, you know, and you just never know what's going to set someone off. In Hidden Pictures, when Mallory starts working at the Maxwell's house, they're vegetarians. So they say, our kid has a vegetarian diet. I don't think that's a political statement, you know, like there are vegetarians in this world. Vegetarian diet. I'm not saying to be a vegetarian is better or worse than not being a vegetarian. I just wrote a situation where a non-vegetarian babysitter from South Philly took a job in an affluent house where the parents are vegetarian. People interpret that in like 100 different ways and write me angry emails about it all the time. My favorite was the one, a woman got to that scene, threw the book around across the room, right? Wrote me a letter saying, you know, my father was a farmer for 40 years. God put animals on this earth for a reason. God wants us to eat cows and fish and cattle. And I'm like, whoa, you know, I get it. I too eat cows and fish and pork. If it's my birthday, I'll order a steak. You know, they're not me. Like, this is just a vegetarian family in a book.
Yeah.
Give it a chance. Keep going. You know, don't stop at chapter 4. And actually, I did put all this in an email to her, and she did finish the book. And she wrote me back. She's like, you know, you're right. She's like, it was really good. I really liked the book. I'm glad I finished it. But people do. And maybe it's like another sign, like the times that we live in, where people just like I don't know. I think they see things through like their own lenses sometimes, and it makes it tricky. You know, I get a lot of angry emails, and I don't think my books are particularly political. I'm trying to write entertaining books about ghosts at weddings. You know?
Yes, they are either. For the record, my father was a farmer. My grandfather was a sharecropper. They do raise plants and vegetables. And a word about Amazon reviews. I take those with such a grain of salt. I know somebody, a friend, whose husband wrote a book, self-published it. She went on Amazon and had like 5 or 6 glowing reviews, how this was the best book ever. She made up different identities. But 5 years later, when they got divorced, suddenly those reviews had a change of heart. And it was the worst book ever written. You've written 3 standalones.
That's right.
Are there any series in your future?
I'd love to write a series someday. I've not had a good idea for one. It seems like it would be the greatest thing in the world, right? It'd be so much less work. If you could just have a series, you'd save so much time. You could write and release books so much faster. One of these days I'm going to have an idea for a series, but I don't know what. Yeah.
And he puts Frank through enough trouble. Maybe he just needs some rest. What's the best part of being a full-time writer?
Being done.
Oh boy. You know, I mean, the work is amazing. I mean, you know, it's amazing to be able to do it. You know, because I did write for like 20 years when I didn't sell anything. And I remember toward the end of those like 20 years, I was like, why am I still doing this? You know? Like, am I crazy? The thing is, I don't think that I could stop doing it. Like, I think I was just going to do it whether I published it or not. I don't know, if anybody's an aspiring writer out there, maybe you know what I'm talking about. It starts to become like a compulsion after a while. I'm incredibly, I feel incredibly lucky that I'm able to like make a living off of it and do it. And it's still really early days. I mean, I've only had 3 books out. So, you know, you look at some of these people, they put out a book a year, they have 20, 30 books out. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. I mean, I'll be lucky if I can do like 1 every other year. If I could get to 10 before I die, I'll be thrilled. But I don't think I could be any faster than that.
As a writer, what are you most proud of?
Oh boy, these are tough questions.
I'll let you skirt.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm proud. You know, I'll tell you what makes me really happy. I got an email the other day from a person who read all 3 of my books, and I'm starting to get a couple of these now. You know, because for a while nobody knew who I was. My first book didn't really sell at all. But then Hidden Pictures. It's kind of like a culty, like word of mouth book. Like it gets passed around to a lot of people. It was never a New York Times bestseller. It never really got any reviews anywhere. But I know that people pass that book to their friends. They give their copy to like their neighbor. Nurses pass it around hospitals. I know, and I'm super proud of that. You know, the fact that like people are just like passing my book around the hospital. A bunch of nurses are reading it. Like, what is like better than that? The fact that people go to libraries to get it, that's like the ultimate, that's the whole reason you do it. Yeah, I think people like discover it. And then when people read all 3, even though they're all very different, this email I got, this woman's like, you know, I can tell that like, you wrote all 3 of them, and I like that they're not the same. You're not doing the same thing over and over. You're trying to do different things each time. It's nice when people appreciate that. Publishing loves to force you to do the opposite. They want you to do the same book over and over and over, so you have a very clear brand. But I just don't think I could like force myself to sit at the desk and do the same thing over and over. It just wouldn't be interesting to me. So I hope I can find people who are like patient enough and like tolerant enough to like veer this way and that way with each book. But fingers crossed.
One of the questions I was going to ask is, have you gotten any positive feedback from readers? But you just said you did, so good. I'm glad. During the course of a book, a character has to have an arc. They have to change. I would think, as a writer, when you're writing several books, you have to change. How has writing and you changed since you began?
Yeah, I sort of know what you mean. Like I do, like this book in particular, the wedding book with Frank and his voice and his way of talking. I started talking more like Frank as I was like writing the book. You know, I could tell a funny story, but this is being recorded, and I don't want it to be on the internet. So you know that does happen. Like the characters sort of like seep into you know. A lot of times writing is just thinking. You're just thinking on paper, you know, and you're deciding what you think about certain things, and you're reaching conclusions. So yeah, sometimes they do, particularly when you're writing first-person books like these are. You know, you just find them like seeping into your personality. I'm not being very articulate about it, but it does happen.
Is there anything you would not write about?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, so lots of things. Hidden Pictures gets sold as a horror novel a lot, but I don't really like a lot of horror fiction because it's too violent. I can't read it. You know, like the really gory stuff. The really, you know, like people getting disemboweled or pulling out their livers or whatever. I just can't do it. I don't think I could do. You know, I feel like this is like, look, what I'm trying to do is write like entertainment. So you know, I like books to have like, I'd like the characters to end the book in a better place than when they started. Like to me, it's just like I don't know. I feel like my favorite stories all do that. So like, maybe happy ending isn't like the very word for it, but I do like positive endings. I think these arcs to be for a reason. I don't want to just torture somebody for 300 pages and then have the book be over. It's just no fun, you know. I got to live with it for 2 years. The reader, it takes them 10 hours. But, I'm thinking, I might just thinking about this for 2 years. So I don't think I would ever write anything too dark. I don't like violence, and but I love suspense. I love the possibility of something terrible happening. That, oh my God, I could I could live with that feeling all day long. It's so much fun. So that's why I love suspense. I love thrillers. I love the possibility of something terrible happening. That I can't get enough of.
Well, I have a couple more questions, but I'd like to hear from you all. So who has a question? Yes, ma'am.
I'd be interested to know who are your 3 favorite authors that you read.
That was going to be my next question. I'm glad you did that. Who are your 3 favorite authors that you read?
Okay. Oh boy. I really should get a good pat answer to this because it comes up all the time and I always answer it differently. But today I'll say. Well, when I came in, there was Stephen King, not partly because he gave me a quote from a book, but I grew up reading him, and I was a teenager in his horror heyday in the 80s when Carrie and Cujo and all those books were coming out, The Shining, I loved all this stuff when I was a kid, loved it, and I think he's insanely talented. I mean, what a storyteller. How many characters has he given to our collective imagination in 50 or 60 years? You just know all these things. And I discovered new things in his work all the time. I was just thinking about Misery. I'm sure most people know Misery. If you haven't read the book, you've seen the movie where James Caan, Kathy Bates, the fan, as James Caan strapped to the bed, and she wants him to write the same book over and over and over. And I was like, it just dawned on me a month ago. I'm like, oh my God, this is a metaphor. This situation that he's talking about, this is something that he has dealt with himself, where readers want you to do a certain thing, and if you're going to change, they're going to break your legs with slashing. So he's great. I see new things in his work all the time. I've always been I'm sorry?
You got 2 more.
2 more? I know. I'll say Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson, incredible. Haunting of Hill House is my favorite haunted house novel. And The Lottery, and she has a ton of great stories. And the last thing to say is that writer, I don't know if people really remember him so much anymore, Ira Levin. Ira Levin, I just think he's incredible. He didn't write too many books, but they're almost all really good. He finished his first book on his 21st birthday. It's a book called The Kiss Before Dying, and it holds up really well. It's a mystery from 1955, won the Edgar Award. Finished it on his 21st birthday. It's got an amazing twist in it that will give you whiplash. It's like a Gone Girl kind of twist where it's oh my God. So if you've never read it, I think it still holds up really well. Then his next book is Rosemary's Baby. Totally different kind of book, right? And another instant iconic premise. Then his next book is Stepford Wives. Totally different book again, but it's another phrase that's entered our lexicon. And so he just had this. He didn't write a lot, but man, the ones that he wrote were just boom, boom, boom. It's pretty impressive.
Anybody else?
Oh yeah, currently. I can name a lot of books. I don't know. Anthony Horowitz, I think, he's pretty reliable. I don't know how he writes so quickly. He has a great book called Magpie Murders. Yes. Really terrific. It's a mystery in a mystery. You get 2 books for the price of 1. I like. He doesn't write that much. There's a guy named Scott Smith who wrote A Simple Plan. He only wrote one other book. And Gillian Flynn wrote Gone Girl. I'm still waiting for her. She said, write the book since Gone Girl. But there are rumors she's working on something. Gone Girl I thought was just incredible. So good. So whatever, if she writes something, I will auto buy it.
Yes, ma'am.
So I am a wannabe writer. So what's your advice? How, and you will say, I'm single. How did you manage your 2 things and to be so successful now that you were doing this, making a living? I hope you're all reading it.
The question is, how do you manage your time? And she hopes he's a millionaire.
You just have to sacrifice things, It's a lot. When I remember Well, so yeah, like when I was at St. Martin's working, until about 6 o'clock for that horrible alcoholic boss, I was like, well, I could go home and now write, or I could go out and have a drink with my friends, And so it was a lot of like, well, I guess I'm going to go home and write. I'm not going to go out and have fun. That's just what it is. I mean, people do all different kinds of things. Some people get up early. Some people, But what I found is that I would recommend that you try to, you don't have to get up 3 hours early. You know what I mean? Like work for like an hour. Just set aside an hour a day. And if we're being honest, I know most people are scrolling on their phones for at least an hour a day, right? Take one of those hours back from your phone and like devote it to yourself, to your art, like use it. Or, stop watching TV or whatever. Like most people are so busy that they can't find an hour a day. And even when I was like working, when I had kids, I could find an hour at night. And just try to write a page. Like sit down for an hour and just try to like write one page. And if you set yourself modest goals like that, it won't seem so overwhelming. Like if you try to write a whole book, it's going to seem impossible. I'm going to do that. But if you say, well, tonight, before I go to bed, I'm going to write one page. And tomorrow I will write another page. In a year, you'll have a draft, right? It's not that long. Like the year's going to be here before you know it, So I have found that it is, when I was first starting to attack it, like just small, modest goals. The best advice I ever heard, there was this writer, his name was, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, he's a crime writer named Charles Willeford, remember him? Miami Blues? His advice was, when you get up in the morning, write a page before you let yourself go to the bathroom. And so you have this really strong incentive, just finish that page. So you could try that too.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Lucille, and she is 8.
Hi, Lucille.
Is a aspiring writer.
Wonderful. Yay.
And so what words of advice or encouragement would you have for a very young aspiring writer?
Encouragement for a very young writer.
Very promising young writer.
Well, let's see. I mean, I think you should definitely have fun with it, right? Write something that you think you'd want to read. I'd read a lot of books too, if you can. Come to your library, get some books out, see what other people are doing. And it should be fun, like you should do what makes you happy, like when you're doing it. When I'm working on something and it is fun, I know that it's working. You know what I mean? Because I'm feeling the fun that I think the reader is going to experience when they read it. Also, don't worry about what other people are going to think. That becomes more of an issue when you get a little older. But don't let that happen to you. Just write for yourself. Do it for yourself. And experiment too. That's a great thing to do when you're young. You can do anything. Try lots of different things. Try writing lots of different stories. Those are all good things. Yeah, different styles. So you can start tonight. You start in the car on the way home.
Is that every?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And read. The more you read, the more you'll see how other people do their stories. And then you can do one better. Other questions? Yes, ma'am?
Speaking of scrolling on your phone, how do you feel about Book Talk? I got lucky enough to find your books on Book Talk from people that enjoyed them very much, and I was glad that I got to enjoy it too. So how do you feel about Book Talk as a newer author?
Okay, Book Talk.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion about it. I mean, I love that people are finding my books on Book Talk, but I'm not on Book Talk or TikTok. Because I just feel like nobody wants to look at me on TikTok. I never want to. Like, these people don't look like me. They don't sound like me. I'm 53. So I feel like I can't go on. I have an Instagram account, and I will. I'll post, like, if I'm doing an event, I'll put that up on Instagram. I think it's great though for readers. I know tons of readers who've met like fellow fans on Book Talk, and that seems really cool. Like, there's a lot I don't like about the internet, but this is like one example of how it's sort of like forged a kind of connectivity among people, which I think is really, really neat. I've been to events where people are like, yeah, we're kind of like an online club. We usually just talk online, but every once in a while we get together for like an event. And we're all from like 50 miles apart. But Book Talk brought us together, which I think that's amazing. You know, I mean, anytime that can happen, that's always a wonderful thing.
Is it on CD?
It's not on there's an audiobook, yeah. Yeah, but I think you have to download it. I don't think they do the, I mean, they may still make those, but, oh, yeah.
You can use it through your audio.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You talked about how you were for 20 years, or you like finally got something published. So when you look something like where you ever think that maybe you could take what you learned and take an idea that you liked at the time, and maybe like don't recreate it with what you do viewpoint or what you learned from your successes.
Going back to those old manuscripts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did that with this wedding book. You know, like I think I mentioned, like I wanted to write this book for 20 years, and I had like a lot of false starts where the first version of the story where I was trying to use the wedding as a structure, because I was like 25 or 26, I think. I was writing it from the point of view of the bride's brother, you know, because the bride wasn't old enough to like consider writing it from the point of view of the dad, you know, and so I just couldn't figure out what it was. You know, I just couldn't get to work, so like I just abandoned it. And so when I went back to write this book, I never actually looked at that manuscript. You know, I just remembered enough of it in my head. I didn't want to look at it. You know, I was like, let me leave that alone. But so I do that. You know, I do have like you know, a notebook, a couple notebooks with like, you know, story scraps and things like that. Sometimes it takes a while to just figure something out, which is a good lesson for the writers, you know, and the aspiring writers. I heard Margaret Atwood, the author of The Handmaid's Tale, she came to Philly a couple months ago, and she was incredible. I think she's like 87 or something like that, sharp as a tack, right? And she had some really good advice that I'll share with you, because I never thought about this before, but I thought it was really smart when she said it. Someone in the audience asked, you know, I'm stuck with my story, what should I do? And she said, you know, the first thing you do when you start writing something is, by default, you choose a point of view, the story. Like, that's the very first thing you do. It's going to be first person, I did this, or it's going to be third person, Sally went into the house. And you don't know anything when you make that choice, right? Like, you're just starting with that. And she's like, maybe you chose the wrong point of view. Maybe her advice was to people who are stuck. She's like, change the point of view. If it's in first person, make it third. If it's in third person, make it first. See if that unlocks something. See if that changes things. And I don't know why I'm saying that. My train of thought totally derailed. But anyway, I think that's really great advice from Margaret Atwood, living legend. So passing it on to you.
I have one more question. I'll take one more from the audience.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
How long did this book actually take after you went back and did the new version? And the book cover, did you have input to the book cover? I'm always curious about that.
This book took a little under 2 years for me to write. I spent a lot of time trying things and not then change it. And, you know, so I write I'm sure I wrote 300,000 words to write this book. You know, I would compare the experience. It's like playing chess. My son is a really good chess player. I'm a terrible chess player because when I'm looking at the board, I can't think more than like 2 moves ahead. And I'm the same way when I'm writing a book. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I can only think like this far ahead. So like I'm constantly like writing something and then taking 2 steps back and trying something else. You know. So it's a really inefficient way to work, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it any better.
So you don't do an outline when you're...
I can't really, I try doing outlines, but like I don't really stick to them. I mean, I try to. And that's for the cover. I'm pretty fortunate because the friends I mentioned earlier who did the Hidden Pictures illustrations, they're both cover designers, and so they did the cover of Hidden Pictures, and now they just, you know, do the covers for like all my books. And they actually sent this, my last one at the wedding, like that cover just came in. They sent probably 10 covers, and one of them was the cover that it is, and we're like, oh, this is like I don't know, I loved it. I just thought it looked great. I love the house. It's exactly like I envisioned the house looking. It's not a real photo. Like they stitched it together from 10 different images in Photoshop, but it would be slick.
Thank you.
You mentioned your next book is about a veterinarian.
Oh, it's about a cat.
About a cat, okay. When can we expect that?
I did it 2 years ago.
I've been working on it since I turned in this one, so I'm already like almost a year into it, which, God, it's such horrible. When I think about it, much more I have to do. But I'm hoping to finish this year, which would mean it would come out in 2026.
I always feel like perfect.
Well, thank you so much.
Jason will be signing over here, and you can buy books there. I hope you all buy at least one. There also are flyers here about the next upcoming events. I know one is Alistair Burke at Boynton Beach, and we've got Greg Hurwitz coming up. You have a question?
You're stretching.
Okay. So please, buy books, come to the rest of the events, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.